I refuse to believe that mankind is a random byproduct of molecular circuitry, no more than the result.
Welcome to first episode of the Stay Ready podcast. I'm Moon.
I'm Sister Mo.
So, we're doing this because with everything going on in the world, between COVID, between Trump, between everything else in politics and on the streets, uh, people have been contacting me and people have been asking about emergency preparedness. So we decided to share what we know about being able to help people. So I know you are very interested in emergency preparedness. So what is your interest in it?
Well, being in a hurricane-prone environment, we just naturally have to be prepared for anything when it comes to hurricane season. But as we know, 2020 has been more eventful than any years we've ever encountered. So now we know that with COVID, with the election on the horizon, as well as Black Lives Matter, as well as all of this racial profiling and all these kind of things going on, we just need to be ready. We never know what's going to happen, and we've always been fighting a fight, and at some point it's going to come to a head. So it's better to stay ready instead of getting ready is what I feel.
And if people don't know, and COVID is on everybody's mind, one of the things that came out today, the CDC reversed itself. So a couple of days ago, they set guidelines and told people that COVID is that it's airborne, that it's aerosolized, and basically that means that a lot of the things that we've been doing with cloth masks and things like that, anything below N95, are probably not effective. And also that means that the distancing, 6 feet, is also not as effective. And then they came back today and said, hold up, we didn't really mean to put that out. We're going to tell y'all what to do in a couple of days. Basically, what I've been telling people from the beginning is, number one, COVID is probably not going anywhere. You need to figure out how to live with it. And how best to keep you and your family safe. And that's up to you. And number two, the powers that be, from Fauci at the beginning, basically making fun of people for wearing masks and then coming back and saying everybody needs to wear a mask. They're throwing mixed signals because they're protecting themselves. You need to protect your family. So you need to do your research, protect your family, and make the best decisions for your family. So we have a lot of things that we're talking about today. And one of the first things is communication.
Right.
So, when we talked about doing this, I had left that off, and Mo thought it was important. Why do you think communication was important?
It's very important. I mean, even within the last few months, T-Mobile, as you know, their system went down and nothing happened. No kind of emergency or anything happened. Their system just basically failed, and people with T-Mobile service were out of communication. I remember in 2016 with the floods in Baton Rouge, cell service went down. So we know that primarily we will not be able to use our telephone service, our internet service to communicate with one another. So we need to have an alternate source of communication.
Right. So as these series go on, we're going to go in depth into a lot of different things. Today is really just an overview.
Yes.
So I just showed some of the methods that I have to communicate in an emergency. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Communications. I've had a few people ask me about communications during an emergency. And one of the first things to go out in an emergency is your cell phone, unfortunately. Landline, cell phones, we can't count on them. You absolutely need a backup plan. So today I'll go over some of the things that I have for communications. Not going to go over them in depth. We're going to go over them in depth in later episodes. But right now, just kind of showing you what I have, what we're going to go into in later episodes as I show you how to use these things. And also, we can talk about some other forms of communications that I may not have, that I may need to get, and some that as a community, it'll be good to get. And the first one, and you'll probably see this if you look it up on a lot of emergency preparation things, is the UV5R. There's a Chinese company called Bofang. They make a lot of different radios, and I have a few of their different radios, and these are all different models from Bofang. Now, there's good and there's bad, and that's without going into an in-depth review. So the good thing is that these radios you can program using a computer. So I can go into each one of those, program certain channels so that all of these radios are on the same channels and in an emergency can talk to each other. Now, the bad news is that those radios are essentially ham radios. And because they're from China and other reasons, you actually are not supposed to transmit on them without a ham radio license or without it being an event of a national emergency. So this particular radio, the UV5R, is actually currently illegal to sell. And it's not illegal to possess, but the government, because of the amount of channels it can do, the amount of frequencies it can do, and different things that don't quite go with the way the US does their radio frequencies, you're not supposed to transmit on them, and they don't want people selling them anymore. You can still have them, but they don't want people selling them. So if you can figure that out. Now, another thing that I have is this Mini 300 world band receiver. So with this world band receiver, I can get a lot of radio channels from all around the world that, in the case of an emergency, if I want to know what's going on, and for whatever reason, the local news is not letting me know or I can't tune in, I can get it from this. Now, this, of course, you can't transmit on this, but it's good to have a lifeline when all communication is cut off. Now, another thing I have, which is going to look crazy, but it's a backup to a backup, is a CB radio. And this is a CB radio. There's plenty of different ones, but CB, civilian band. And a lot of people still use civilian band. Some people say it's dead. Some people still use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's a backup to a backup to a backup. But what I carry primarily in my bug out bags, and I made several for different family members, but just regular walkie-talkie radios. And again, the good thing about the Bofang, the Chinese radios, is that I can actually program them to the same frequencies as these regular radios, plus a bunch of different frequencies. So in an emergency, they can communicate with these radios can communicate with them. But I make sure that when I have these radios, I also keep batteries that I check periodically, make sure they're not leaking, instructions. And the most important thing is I make sure that I have with the radios what our primary channel is and what our backup channel is. So in every emergency bag that I have, this is the channel you go to as a primary to communicate with different family members. If you can't catch them on there, or if there's interference on there, then you will go to the backup channel. But the number one thing that I use this for right now, as I said, you're not supposed to transmit on it legally, is to monitor the weather. I mean, you can get the weather channel, you can get marine channels, you can get all types of channels with that, and just monitor different channels. So those are the things that I have right now for communications. Please, if you have any questions, ask the questions. I'll do my best to answer them. When I go into each one of these things in more detail, I'll be answering any questions that you have. So it's imperative that, if you're interested in communications, you do ask the questions. And communication is very important, extremely important in an emergency. What brought it home for me when there was an earthquake in DC, I remember the earthquake really wasn't even that bad, but it knocked out cell phone signals for probably 2 or 3 days, and which was strange because I have a lot of family in DC, and my mother actually has a Baltimore phone number. And even though she was in New Orleans, she couldn't use her phone. I had a sister in LA who had a Baltimore number, couldn't use her phone. It was just crazy that such a minor emergency caused such a major communication problem. And my sister asked me what other forms of communication are there, and that's when I started looking into ham radio. And we are going to get more in depth and get more details about ham radio and how to get a ham radio license and how it can help our community as far as communicating. But again, those ham radios, you're not supposed to transmit on them on regular times unless you have a license. But in an emergency, it's okay. So again, any questions, let us know. Until then, we'll see you next time. So yeah, we ham radios, we definitely need to get more of our people who to learn the classes, to get the licenses, because it's an important way for us to be able to communicate not only within the city, but also with other communities outside of the city. Exactly. If phones go down and things like that.
Exactly. And one of the things that you mentioned in the video, which I like, is redundancy. You have multiple ways in case any of them fail on you. One thing that I do want to also look into is creating those cell towers or antennas, so where we can have more distance in between us so that we are able to communicate with each other, through further distances, and then building a network so that we can communicate with people outside of our immediate area so we can know what's going on in case anything or danger is heading in our direction, or if any is leaving, we can also notify family or our network outside of where we are immediately.
So, and this kind of goes into what the next segment is. I was talking to someone who went out to Lincoln Beach, and we're about to talk about that. And they were telling me, and I absolutely need to go and check it out because I hear it's a beautiful thing. But they were telling me how they use radios to communicate, to to make sure that everybody's safe, to right. just to make sure that everything happens when it's supposed to happen. So they've developed a communication system there. Right. Using radios that is absolutely important. So we're about to talk a little bit about Lincoln Beach. Do you want to say anything before we look at it?
Yeah, so this next video, I actually got a chance to spend some time overnight, 2 days, camping out in Lincoln Beach. And on Lincoln Beach, there's absolutely no power, no running water, no anything. You are strictly out there with nature and yourself. So for me, it was a good time to put into practice everything that we are going to be discussing and everything that you will potentially need should anything fail on you. So we can go to the video and discuss. So here on this particular day, it had rained all day. So we were dealing with some damp and wet twigs and everything, but starting a fire is so vital in survival when you're outdoors. So you must practice. It seems easy, but it's definitely not easy. One of the easier tips that I've learned is something as simple as your lint dryer. Your dryer lint is something that you can use to start a fire. So when you're building a fire, there are 4 main steps. First, clearing your area. Secondly, making sure that you have all of your fuel, your tinder, your tick, your sticks, your twigs, and your fuel, which are your logs. You start with your tinder and you build from small to large. You start with your tinder, then you add on your small and twigs and your dry leaves. Then you go next to your pencil size sticks, and then to your logs. Adding this over time, it'll help build your fire and keep it for the longevity. Secondly, we cooked outdoors. So what you need to make sure you have is either a stainless steel pot or container or a cast iron. One of the benefits of cast iron is it has iron in it, and our bodies need iron. It's easy to clean. It's easy. It takes on heat no matter if it's high or low. But on this particular video, I used a grill that you can get from your standard Walmart or Academy store, and just placed it over the fire, and I cooked. You must practice because typically you cannot control your heat unless you absolutely know what you're doing. So this definitely requires some practice. Needless to say, everything turned out well, but this definitely requires some practice, especially with building a fire in a wet, damp location. The food was a process, but it definitely came together. Everybody enjoyed. Here we did some quick and simple.
So thank you. So tell me about the experience, because you spent overnight in there, right?
I did. 2 days.
So how was that? And you brought your daughter?
I brought my daughter. I had family. I had friends out, and I mean, it was a group of 5 or 6 of us, and we basically lived off the land. Like I said, there's no plumbing, there's no running water, no anything. So everything was biking style. Um, I once before we even got a chance to actually fish, and we cooked what we caught, and that's necessary. You know, when you're in survival situations, I think one of the 5 components that you must have is, shelter, ways to gather and process water and food, uh, be able to store fire, as well as being able to navigate your terrains. And you have to know where you are, and you have to know what you're up against.
So tell us a little bit about Lincoln Beach before we go on, just because I know this is a totally new thing, and not that Lincoln Beach is a new thing. Lincoln Beach is our thing.
Right.
But people in the community got together, and you may know someone, so name them, give them their kudos, please. But people in the community got together, started cleaning up the beach and making it so that people can once again enjoy it. So tell us a little bit about it before we go in the next segment.
So, from my understanding, and me not being from here, but I have a deep appreciation for Lincoln Beach. Lincoln Beach was one of the only beaches the Black civilians could go to, and citizens in the city could go to, when Pontchartrain Park was open to the whites only. And this was back in the 50s. I think it stayed open for a few years, and then it closed like in 1965, and has been closed ever since. So it's severely overgrown. There was trash everywhere, and the community organization New Orleans for Lincoln Beach is now, sponsoring, cleanups. They're in conversations with the city hall and the mayor, with initiating an assessment to reopen the beach to the public. It's absolutely beautiful. Being that it's in New Orleans East is absolutely a jewel and a diamond that a lot of the citizens are just now, some of them for the first time, learning and seeing. So it's absolutely beautiful to be able to have these conversations with the elders that come across for the first time, people that have come or were at Lincoln Beach when it was open, and now they're seeing it after 50 years of it being closed. So it's definitely a treat, no matter what stage it's in right now. It's definitely something you need to get out to.
Okay, so the next segment that we're doing, a lot of people know I'm also the president of the NOLA chapter of NAGA. NAGA is the National African American Gun Association. Especially since, the COVID started with this year and everything's been going on, Black women have been stepping up to the plate as far as self-defense, as far as buying firearms, as far as taking classes, learning.
Yep.
So I am also a firearms instructor. So that's important.
Very.
So self-defense is important when it comes to emergency preparedness. It's also important when it comes to just taking care of your family.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to have Fudge, who is one of our instructors, just go over a little bit about stance and proper grip when it comes to a firearm. And those are like the main things. People come to the range for the first time, or even some of them, unfortunately, for the 10th time.
Right.
And all they really know about firearms is what they've seen on TV.
Yep. And thank God for Sister Fudge, because, I've not a pro, but I've been to the range a few times, but having her there and teaching me what she knew was definitely a treat.
Yeah, and she does some great classes. If anybody wants to take them, we'll put her info on there. But she's going to go ahead and show proper stance and grip. So enjoy.
So today we're going to go over the proper stance and proper grip for your firearm. Before you do anything, you want to make sure that you're never ever pointing your firearm at anyone. You know exactly what's around you. And so next, you'll make sure that you clear it. Make it safe, okay? This is important. Remove your magazine. I don't have on my thigh holster, but I'll just put it in my pocket. Clear the chamber. Safety off. Chamber is clear. Stick your pinky in, you can see nothing's in there. It's fully empty. So, whenever you're practicing with your firearm, make sure that you keep all your ammunition, as so, out of the room. So for this, I'm just going to put this down to the side. And my firearm is clear. Nothing's in the chamber. Empty. Okay, but I'm still gonna put the safety on because you never ever know. Safety is always first. So first of all, proper stance. Make sure that your feet are shoulder width apart. Plant your feet firmly into the ground, slightly bend your knees so that you have full control. Your toes, throughout the balls of your feet, throughout the ends of your feet, are fully depressed on the ground. So you're here. Next thing you know, wherever your firearm is, draw it to the side, hand on your body, because you never ever want to cross and shoot your hand off. Mistakes happen all the time. So when you come here, you keep your fingers on your safety guards. Now the next point is going to be proper grip. This part is extremely important because if your grip is sloppy, if you're teacupping or anything like that, you can shoot everywhere else and completely miss your target. This is dangerous. So proper grip is always important. You definitely want to put the meat of your dominant hand right here. Make sure it's clasped up against it closely. Put your finger on the safety. There should be if some people have them on their firearms, I know I do. Some people don't. But you always make sure that you keep your finger off the trigger unless you're actually ready to shoot something. And then only by then, after that, that's when trouble begins. So in the meantime, index finger right here, I'm tight in here. Now you're gonna see my hand kind of go around because I don't have my magazine at the bottom. However, if my magazine were already in here, you'll be able to see my magazine comes to about right here at the end of it. But don't worry about that right now. We're just talking about safety. So after you have this hand in position, it's firmly on there. Your other hand, meat on meat. This meat, equal pressure. And so you come in, hug it. And so you see my firearm actually has a safety grip on this side and on the opposite side. Therefore, when I look down, my fingers, my thumb and my index finger, they are together. And I'm holding it. I don't really want to point toward the camera, but just so you can see what it looks like, it's like this. So I'm going to go through the steps. Feet planted firmly, slightly bent. I am all on the earth. My toes are on the earth, my balls of my feet, and the backs of my feet, they're all on the earth. Because what happens is if you just happen to shoot and draw and you're not planted, you're going to go back. The recoil from your firearm will definitely send you back. And you'll shoot everything else up again except for your intended target. And then some. And that's a whole different situation. So for this situation, here we go. Feet planted, I'm here. Side, bring it up. High compressed position. This is where you have to grip and know what you're doing. So now that we're here, high compressed position. After this, you go into this. Straight like that. Come back, drop it all. Bring it back. High compress, push out. You're going to see that my head is tucked. I'm level with the sights. It's almost as if my body is crunched. But this is what normally happens whenever our bodies or our lives are in impending danger. So that's natural. So we're going to show you from the side how it looks. Good? Okay. So here, going through the steps, I'm slightly bent. You're gonna see it later, but I'm slightly bent. And my chest, I'm not overlapping myself, but I'm here. So I'm coming up into the high compressed position. This is what it looks like from the side. Take note. My shoulders are up. I'm already kind of cowering my head down. And now I fully extend. Both of my hands are extended. One is not leaning, supporting. I don't have one leg back here. I'm here with everything. My whole body is into it. And therefore, I control my firearm. I control the recoil, which controls the target.
Awesome job, Sister Fudge. And it was so good to learn from her. One of the things that I didn't realize I was doing was that left foot in front of the right, which would throw me off balance if I were really in a situation where I had to pivot and be ready for whatever came at me. So it was a blessing to have her there and to learn from someone who is certified, who is a professional in what she does and also a sister. What more can I say?
Well, the having 1 foot forward and 1 foot back is called the Weaver stance, and a lot of people still do it, and a lot of people still swear by it. And people will give you a lot of different reasons. The what makes the most sense to me is that when body armor came into fashion, and a lot of people are using body armor now, when you take that kind of Weaver stance where you kind of sideways, you open up part of your body. So squaring off is the way most people teach it now, where you're directly facing instead of being at kind of an angle, because that way police, military, people like that who come up with these things and they're wearing body armor, they want all of their body armor facing the target.
Right,
So,
okay.
I mean, people give a lot of different reasons about, but that's, that makes the most sense to me, because the truth is, when I do martial arts as well, that both of them are fighting stances.
Right.
Having 1 foot back is a fighting stance. Having your feet shoulder width apart, legs bent is also a fighting stance. And both of them are useful. So when it comes to that, and I instruct people, I just tell them, do what's comfortable.
Well, I mean, even being an athlete, that's a stance that's familiar with me, because they would tell you to bend your knees, spread your legs shoulder width apart, and be prepared. So it makes perfect sense to me.
So the next thing I'm going to do is food storage. And, food storage is kind of near and dear to my heart, especially right now, seeing all of these people in these food lines. And I've been storing food for years in Mylar bags, buckets. And there are a lot of things that you could put into Mylar bags and buckets that will literally last 30 years. And the one that I always tell people is beans and rice. 25-pound bag of beans, 25-pound bag of rice. For a family of 3, you could eat that 3 times a day, and nobody wants to eat that 3 times a day, but you could eat that 3 times a day for a month and a half. And, how much is that going to cost you? $30 to feed your family for a month and a half. So, when you talk about emergency preparedness, you talk about preparation, and I see, people in these food lines, and I understand that it's necessary. A lot of times it is very necessary, but I also want to stress to people that, feeding your family at the end of the day is all your responsibility. And just putting some money aside, putting some food in long-term storage is always a good thing. So do you want to say anything before we look at this?
Oh, let's see what you have.
All right. So just check it out. And basically, this is something that I did earlier this year as far as storing food. And it's what I actually do to my food to get it stored. So here you go. I've been asked a lot of questions about food storage. So I decided to show you all how I store food for a long term in a way that, the food stays for pretty much as long as you need. So it's with Mylar bags and buckets. I always get the food grade buckets. You don't have to get food grade buckets because the food is not touching the Mylar. But my thing is that, if later I have to use these buckets for anything else, to hold food or to hold water or something like that, you want food grade buckets. So you get Mylar bags, food grade buckets, and at the end, we're going to do a heat seal. So I have a few different types of beans. I have rice. Right here, what you see is actually flour. Now, when you're dealing with flour, the best kind is white flour, unfortunately. The, regular whole wheat flour will stay for longer in this type of situation, which, all the air is taken out of it. But because of the oils and different things, it does not last as long as bleached flour. Here you see rice. Now, rice, for people who know, rice will last forever pretty much, especially if you have it in a situation like this. Put in a Mylar bag with oxygen absorbers, seal it. You could come back to that rice forever. Now, the flour, I've had someone use that flour after I stored it for 5 years, and they were extremely happy. Here are some beans, got some kidney beans. You can't not have kidney beans in New Orleans. So I have a few different types of beans, and those are the kidney beans. I think next I'll probably have some pinto beans. But, I store a lot of different things, kidney beans, pinto beans. There's a pinto beans. And beans, again, just like rice, beans will last pretty much forever, especially if you have them sealed with no oxygen. But even outside of that, here's sugar. Now, sugar actually will last forever, and sugar does not have a problem with oxygen. So you don't need to put oxygen absorbers in sugar. As a matter of fact, what happens when you do put oxygen absorbers in sugar is it makes it hard. So here I have a damp cloth. I'm running it around the inside to take off any powder that may have, so it gets a good seal. So I'm just kind of going in right inside the bag where I'm going to seal it, and any powder, just wiping it off, letting that dry. So now here is the sealing process. So I just take anything hard. Sometimes I actually use a collie stick, but here I'm using a ruler. Put it under there, and what you do is you iron it closed. Now, Mylar is, has plastic in it. So once you start ironing, that plastic melts and it creates a heat seal. But here, I'm not going to seal it completely. I'm going to leave a little bit of space at the end. And you'll see why we leave that space a little bit later. So you seal it as much as you can, leave a little bit of space. And what happens is, once you seal it, get out as much air as you can. Then when you get the oxygen absorber, you put the oxygen absorber in that space, and that, which is what I'm doing now. And then you go ahead and you seal it completely. Now, what I've been doing after I seal it completely is going above the seal that I did, that I'm about to do now, and giving it a double seal. You probably don't need to do that, but that's just me, because I mean, if my plan is to make sure this food lasts forever, I'm going to double check it. So I make sure that I double seal everything. So once I do that, once I seal it, once I double seal it, then I go through and put in instructions, and you're going to see that in a minute as well. You would be surprised at how many people don't know how to cook beans from scratch, don't understand that you need to soak beans. There's some people out here don't even know how to cook rice. Unfortunately, it's a real thing. So what I do is I put instructions on how to cook. I also put recipes into each bucket with things. So like with the flour, and you'll see coming up right now, I have everything that I need in there to make biscuits, to make bread, things like that. Then at the top, I put in when I book.
Awesome job.
Yeah, well, thank you. So do you have any questions?
I think you did a great demonstration. I am very surprised at how easy it looks, and there are so many things that we can do here in Louisiana. Of course, we love red beans, but I don't want to eat red beans every day, like you say. So, I'm very excited to try and see what else we can probably put in there. And it's a good idea to put the recipe printouts in there, as well as any other ingredients you might need.
Right. Well, like I said, I started putting the recipes in there because I realized, even just something as simple as beans, when most people are getting beans out of
The box.
Right, out of a box, and they just cook, like, people don't know to soak them overnight. Some people don't even know how to cook rice that's not
Soggy.
right.
Or too hard. We are very particular about our food.
So the next thing that we are going to talk about is IFAC. And I'm trying to get to that place right now. So what an IFAC is an individual first aid kit. So some people call it a blowout kit. When I took the class, they called it a blowout kit. So what that is, it's a kit that deals with massive trauma, gunshot wounds, knife wounds, car accidents. I've had to use my blowout kit several times.
Wow.
So it's absolutely something good to have. If you go to the range, you should have a blowout kit every time you go.
And that's something that I did not know. So that's something I'll definitely be adding to my regimen.
Yeah. So we're going to look at that now. I don't go into detail about how to use the items in it. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that I am not a medical professional. I've definitely taken classes on how to use all of these things. I wouldn't use them unless it was absolutely necessary. But what I don't want to do is give people instruction that I'm not qualified to give.
Right.
So I kind of go through what's in my kit. I don't really show how to use it, but I have a doctor who's coming on to show how to use a tourniquet. And I also asked him if he could show us how to deal with a tension pneumothorax,
Right.
which is one of the worst things that can happen, but it's also one of the most common things that can happen. And a lot of times, if you reach it in time, it's easy to deal with, but a lot of people don't know how to deal with it. So let's go ahead and look at that. But everyone should have not only a first aid kit, but an IFAK kit. So take a look at this, and hopefully it's something that you will be able to help your family with. I wanted to talk to you all about a blowout kit, or some people call it an IFAK. IFAK stands for Individual First Aid Kit. So we've been going to the range about every other week. Maybe a month or so ago, we had an incident where somebody there got slide bite. Not anybody that I was supervising, but a bad case of slide bite. If you don't know what that is, it resulted in a nice size cut here. And I was lucky that I had my IFAK with me, and I was able to help at that point. So, blowout kit, IFAK, I'll use the terms interchangeably here. But basically, anytime I go to the range, I have one with me. I make sure that the people who are around me know where it is. Now, if you have kit or gear on, you should have an IFAK on your person. And a lot of times people wear them not where they can reach them. And, what people don't understand, like, well, if somebody gets hurt and you have to reach it and it's way back there. No, your IFAK, your blowout kit is for you. So if you get hurt and someone comes up to help you, your kit is already on you. So what you're supposed to do is let people know, hey, the people around you, this is where my kit is. So that they know you get hurt, they can grab that kit. So we're going to go into this kit and see what's in here. Now, some of these things that we're going to talk about absolutely need to be expanded upon by a medical professional. I'm not a medical professional. I've taken some classes, I've taken some courses in these things, but I'm not a medical professional. So when we want to really learn about them, I'm going to have some people come on and have conversations with us and instruct us on how to put on a tourniquet, for instance, how to deal with a tension pneumothorax. So let's go into the blowout kit. So it is for massive trauma, bullet wounds, knife wounds, car wreck, anything that's causing uncontrolled bleeding. In fact, if you haven't seen, a lot of places have what they call a stop the bleed class. And in the stop the bleed classes, they go deep into these. So I'm just gonna go into what's in mine. This is an emergency bandage. I prefer the Israeli bandages. I've had to use them at work before. They work great, and we can go one day into how to set those. This is not an Israeli bandage, but it is an emergency bandage, and we'll do a demo of this as well. So it's a 4-inch hemorrhage control bandage. So that's the first thing we're going to pull out. Now, another roll of dressing, gauze. And again, we're trying to stop the bleed, so absolutely need that. Gloves, of course, I have 2 pair in here, 2 pair of gloves. And when we had the incident at the range, that was the first thing I did, put on my gloves. We're living in a world of COVID. I would put on my gloves even without the world of COVID. But you want to make sure that you're keeping yourself safe, you're keeping other people safe when you're rendering aid to people. So I made sure that I had gloves. Now, this is a chest seal. So why would you need a chest seal? So one of the main ways that people die during massive trauma is what they call a tension pneumothorax. A tension pneumothorax, basically, if you get in your chest area, if you get a puncture wound in your chest area, it can cause air to enter your chest area. Now your lungs expand and contract. So every time your lungs contract, it sucks air in. As your lungs expand, they can't fully expand. And so every time you breathe out, and your lungs get more and more contracted until you basically suffocate. So what you need to do with that, I have a chest seal, but a tension pneumothorax is really something that you can get a piece of plastic, You can get a piece of tape. And again, we'll have a medical professional come on and have those conversations with you. But, it's also important just to let you all know what it is right now. So that's a chest seal. The other thing dealing with the tension pneumothorax would be, and this you absolutely would need some medical instruction on, a 14 gauge needle. And I'm not even going to go into how to use that or why, because I do want a medical professional to have that conversation. In fact, I would prefer you take a class. Take a class, really learn how to use it. You should, at the very least, have taken a basic first aid course. After a basic first aid course, you want to take Stop the Bleed and things like that. But you absolutely need that for the safety of yourself and your family. It's imperative. So, shears so that if someone has an injury, you can cut those clothes off. You don't have to try to wiggle somebody out. You just take these shears, cut it off, and get to the problem right away. Now, hemostatic granules. This is Celox. So you want some way, if someone has a wound, they're bleeding massively, this would be, beside the gauze, another way to stop the bleeding. And these granules you would pour in there. A lot of people really don't like them because when you get to a doctor, they actually have to clean that out. In my understanding, and I've never had these poured into a wound, is that it does not feel good. But if someone's about to bleed out, you do what you have to do. Now, nasopharyngeal airway. So in order to insert this, you do need some sort of lubrication because this airway goes into the nose and down. So you would have to have some Vaseline, something to let it go. Very uncomfortable. But when you're saving someone's life, we're not talking about comfort. Tape, of course, waterproof tape. Now, the other two things I have is an all-weather notebook and a Sharpie. Sometimes you may have to write on the person what's going on so that people who come after you can know. Sometimes you may have to make a note and tape it to the person. Either way, communication is key, and this is how you can communicate if someone's injured to the people down the line who are treating them. Now, I saved this for last. This is a rat tourniquet. I've heard a lot of different things about them. I have a few different types of tourniquets. This is the one I have in here because it's small, and we are going to have someone come and show us exactly the best way to use a tourniquet. But a tourniquet is for, again, massive bleeding, especially on, your arms, legs, places like that where you can put a tourniquet on. And I'm not going to go into how to do it right now because I absolutely want to have someone come on who's an expert and who can show y'all correctly. I don't want to give you bad information. So there we go. That is what's in my blowout kit /IFAC. If you have any questions, concerns, let me know. If you'd like to come on and you're an expert and you want to demonstrate any of these, but I do have some people in mind. So, again, I'm willing to answer all your questions. Let me know if you have any. Thank you. So that's really kind of all we have for today. There's some other things that we have going on down the line.
Yep.
To have some professionals come in and teach some things. And what other things that you wanted to talk about?
Well, definitely preparedness in terms of what to have on you, your everyday carry, your bug out bag. We're going to discuss creating your network around you, as well as self-defense, martial arts, gun and firearms training. What else?
We're going to do more on food storage. We're going to do some on navigation. And a lot of people really don't understand the importance of navigation,
Right.
And especially if you're someplace like New Orleans where you may have to evacuate.
Yes.
I have things like I'll make sure that I have maps that even show, how the height of the terrain.
Wow.
So you want to make sure if you're traveling in a direction, what is that direction to sea level? Is it below sea level? Is it above sea level? So, if the city's flooding, there's a lot of things you want to know. So I have several, I think 4 or 5 different maps of the city that I would carry with me that I would look at.
And one of the tips that I learned as well is anytime that you're passing on the road and state borders, to stop at those rest stops and grab those maps. In addition to that, Academy or Walmart has, printouts, World Atlas or the National Atlas. So if you're ever in just out of the state, traveling or visiting somewhere, it's good to have that kind of information. But you also need to know how to read a map. It's not something you just open up and you know how to do.
Right. So that's the first episode of Stay Ready NOLA. What we're going to have from here are more demonstrations, more information. And one of the things that we are going to do is we're going to start weekly, monthly, bi-weekly. We have to figure out when we're going to do it, but actually getting people together
Yes.
to do hands-on workshops on all of these subjects.
Right.
So that people are not looking at it on the screen, not looking at me do it. You're doing it yourself.
It makes a world of difference because, and you even speaking about the Blowout Kit, I can't imagine being in a moment and having to apply that without any practice. So there's a lot of nerve and adrenaline that goes into these moments when you have to put all of this into play. So practice is so vital.
And one thing that I've found, and I do a lot of classes, is that when an emergency happens, I absolutely fall back on my training. And, when I did have to use my Blowout Kit, I saw all that blood. The first thing was, oh my God, all that blood. And the second thing was, you trained for this.
Exactly.
Just do what you know how to do. So getting that training is imperative. Learning is imperative. And we're going to do that. So thank you all for tuning in to Stay Ready NOLA.
Thank you. See you guys next time.
Have a good day.
Peace.